What's up, everybody? Welcome. Guy Haberman here on the YouTube channel where you can like and subscribe. We appreciate it. Trigger warning. I used the word cooked in the thumbnail. People love using the word cooked. A lot of people this morning feeling like Keyshawn Johnson was on Undisputed on Monday. Take a listen.
He has turned back into
It's not. He's not. He hasn't turned into a full-blown pumpkin. He's a small one right now, a little small one outside the door. Sits under. He's one of those. No, look, it's real. Okay, and we're gonna have a Brock Purdy conversation, obviously, throughout the show.
Yeah.
But it's real. I understand he's done a tremendous job, and we've praised him. But remember, at the beginning of the season, and I allowed you, Michael, and Richard Sherman to convince me that I didn't need to see an entire season. Remember that? Oh, you got to give up. And I gave in, and now the last 3 weeks I'm sitting there going, why didn't I listen to my first mind instead of allowing you guys, Skip, to convince me to do something different?
That's how a lot of people feel, I think, today. And, it's understandable. When you throw back-to-back, back-breaking interceptions, it's bad. It's unclutch with Joe Cool in the building. It was bad. And I think it's confusing. But as we did at the beginning of the year, because Keyshawn just said it, at the beginning of the year, he let them convince him that Brock Purdy was elite, right? And now there's a lot of talk about him turning into pumpkins or being cooked. I saw Grant call him a fugazi, a fraud, right? And just like the conversation at the beginning of the year, before the year, 8 games into the year, every little step along the way, all these extremes are crazy. Here's what gets you benched. You can't see it, you can't throw it, and you can't handle it. And when you listen to Kyle Shanahan talk after these last 2 games, the Browns game, whatever, like you could excuse if you wanted to. But even if you didn't want to, like you go, all right, that's a weird situation. Let's go play the Vikings and the Bengals. But if you listen to Kyle the last 2 games, the last 2 post-game press conferences, he has not felt like he has not talked like he's got a quarterback that can't see it, can't throw it, can't handle it. I mean, that's what gets you benched. Now, I don't think he didn't see the linebacker. As Tony Romo pointed out yesterday, he broke it down. He thought he got tricked by the linebacker. I do think, and I was saying this to John yesterday on the podcast, which you can listen to down in the description below or watch on this YouTube channel. There are some complications that comes with guys that throw with as much anticipation as he throws with, which is you better be right because your arm is not going to make up for a mistake, right? Like one thing we've seen the last 2 weeks, in the middle of the field, he throws an interceptable ball. The 3rd down conversion he threw back across his body to George Kittle against the Bengals. The next play, kind of across his body again, back to Christian McCaffrey in the middle of the field for a touchdown. Those are really, there aren't a lot of things that you or I could do on an NFL field. But that ball he lofted back to McCaffrey, if you were standing in front of it, you could have caught it. They're really interceptable balls. So, like when he makes one thing we've seen the last 2 weeks, when he makes a mistake in the middle of the field, because there's no over-the-top sideline throws. But one thing that he loves to do, one thing he really trusts himself to do, is layer the ball over the middle of the field. And he really trusts that what he's seeing is what's happening, which is good. Like the one thing I thought yesterday after the 2 interceptions that was positive for a guy who isn't just a power arm who's powering the ball to his receivers, that he still trusted what he was seeing after that, tells you that he can handle it, right? If you're going through it, can he see it? Can he throw it? Can he handle it? To me, those are the 3 things that make you a starter or get you benched. If any one of those things is can't, you get benched. If you can see it and can throw it, but you can't handle it, you're not going to last. If you can see it and you can handle it, but you can't throw it, welcome to being a backup for 13 years. If you can't see it, you can throw it and you can handle it. If you can't see it, you're not even going to last as a backup. So right now, that is how you got to watch every part of what he does. And I think the real illuminating statistic from yesterday, which correctly nobody has talked about. Let me be very clear before I say this stat, because I'm going to say this stat, and some of you are going to think that it means I'm saying Brock was incredible. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm going to tell you a stat right now. Maybe it's going to blow your mind. Maybe you check the box score and already knew this. On Sunday against the Bengals, you ready? Brock Purdy had a career high 365 yards. What does that tell us? Does it tell us he had the greatest game of his career yesterday? No. Does it tell us he was great yesterday? No. Does it tell us we should ignore the 2 interceptions and just move on? He ain't the problem. No. It tells us that's not the 49ers recipe. Which I think most of you, when you hear that, go, yeah, we know. They got to be able to run the ball, and they got to be able to stop people. They need more plays on offense if they're not going to stop people. It is so, like, I think I'm sure you feel this way. When you watch the game, you become a clock. When you watch the 49ers play, you become a clock expert because you understand how long it takes to score, and you understand when they're down multiple scores or when they're not stopping their opponent, which they haven't the last 2 weeks, that being down a score with the ball, being down 2 scores with the ball is great. You come down and score. Now you're down a score. But they're going to score again. They're going to score again. The 49ers were 8.2 yards per play against the Bengals. I'm here to tell you that their offense, who has scored 17 points 3 weeks in a row after looking like the most dominant offense in the NFL, I'm here to give you the very unpopular take that their offense isn't actually that far off. Say what you want. You can't hurt me. I'm wearing the armor of being on the internet for 30 years. Not 30. Well, Twitter. 20. Not quite, but you know. When you are over 8 yards of play, and I know somebody in here said a lot of garbage time. No, their offense, they looked better, I thought, than the non-Debo version. But they scored 17. And the reason is because he threw a back-breaking interception in the red zone. What have we talked about a lot with Brock? Not just that he doesn't throw interceptions, but that he throws a ton of touchdowns. Well, right now, and he had a fumble, by the way. Right now, he's not throwing touchdowns. He's thrown 1 touchdown in each of the last 3 games. The interceptions, to a degree, like when people said, I've seen some of this too. Now I'll go the other way, right? That's not a defense of Brock, but I think there's like an overcorrection to, oh, he must be a pumpkin. He's cooked. He's a fraud, right? I don't think that stuff's true. At the same time, I've seen some of the stuff from yesterday, like Mahomes threw 2 picks and fumbled the ball. And nobody's saying anything. Okay, stop. Patrick Mahomes has established that in any given year, you're going to roll out the ball and he might throw 50 touchdowns, right? That we're just going to sleepwalk our way to 43 touchdowns. Like Patrick, that is established. So when Patrick Mahomes throws 2 picks and has a fumble, the reason nobody freaks out is because they know he's got, I don't know, like 8 games of 3 touchdowns or more still coming. Like, we know that for a fact. It's happening. Like, how many touchdown passes does Patrick Mahomes average per game, right? Let's just do a little quick. We'll go to last year. He threw 41 touchdowns. He started 17 games. That's 2.4 touchdowns per game, right? So, like, you go back to the Brees comp. You know, Drew Brees threw interceptions, but he threw a ton of touchdowns. He led the league in touchdowns. He led the league in yards repeatedly. Okay? So that's not an excuse either. A lot of this is a function of the guy's played a season of football, and we don't have a big enough body of work yet to know exactly what he is. I'll repeat what I've been saying since before the season. There has to be some regression statistically for a quarterback who throws no picks. And I think John made a good point yesterday. He said, well, do those picks come in the first quarter? Or do they come when you're in the situation the Niners have been in the last 2 weeks? And the answer is they come in this when you're trailing. They have arrived when they hurt the most. At the same time, okay, this is why this thing is I think he's a good quarterback. There is evidence that he can see it. There is evidence that he can throw it. And there is evidence that he can handle the pressure. He made a bunch of throws yesterday that bottom half of the league quarterbacks don't consistently make. Every quarterback that puts on an NFL uniform can make some of those special throws sometimes. He made a lot of them yesterday. I didn't GFF was not on staff yesterday, Guy Football Focus, if you're new here. To grade all the throws, but I can tell you I was writing down all his best and worst throws, and he had a ton of plus, like throws that would have been plus or plus graded throws. He had a lot of them. If you watch the game again, if you watch the game, you know that doesn't make up for back-breaking interceptions. But I do think in the question of is he regressing, the answer is, I believe he is statistically regressing. I don't think he, the player, is regressing. If it looked like, I saw like this, the idea of Linsanity is a fun comp. Jeremy Lin's run with the New York Knicks, Linsanity, is maybe the greatest thing I've ever witnessed, my favorite thing I've ever witnessed in sports. You got to understand, like everybody watched SportsCenter, even then. And it was just every night you'd be like, we got to watch. Now the games were on too, but like, we got to see these highlights. What did he do today? The internet existed. You could watch the highlights on Twitter. Like all that social was already here, but and eventually that bubble burst, right? I don't think that's what's happening here with Brock. They're not going to have a perfect quarterback. I think that much is clear. But that much should have been clear from the beginning, and it's why through the first 5 weeks of the season, remember, the evidence, if you think I'm a Brock apologist, it's not the case. The evidence is here, right here on this YouTube channel. It can be found. If you've been watching this, you've heard me say it multiple times. I thought it was insane. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was soft. All these people who said 5 weeks in, I don't want to hear anybody question Brock Purdy anymore. It's over. Shut it down. There's no debate. He's proven all the doubters wrong. Right here, multiple times. I said that is a ridiculous. That is stupid. It's like to lack that much foresight is insane. To set yourself up for that big of a fall, to say that 5 games into, halfway through a guy's first and a half season, whatever. I mean, he played like a year in. Have we not watched football? Have we not seen Mark Sanchez and Colin Kaepernick and on and on and on with quarterbacks who you think a year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, like that guy's going to develop into a franchise quarterback, and it doesn't happen? Have we not witnessed that? So to say 5 games in, I don't want to hear it anymore, it's settled, was always asinine. It was always insane. It was always stupid. And that's not hindsight, because I said it repeatedly. Let's chill. Like, careers are made over careers. Careers are not made over a season. Okay? A season is made over a season. But careers are made over years. Franchise quarterbacks are made over years because you got to go through it. You got to prove you can win in crunch time. He hasn't. Neither is the stat on Shanahan, lack of comebacks. If there's one thing Brock Purdy really needs to be able to become, it's the guy who can make up. This is what every great quarterback does. You accentuate your coach's greatness, and your coach accentuates your skills. You also make up for each other's deficiencies. Kyle Shanahan's teams do not come back in the fourth quarter, whatever the stat is now. I haven't updated it lately, but I mean, today. I think I saw it was like 0 for 36 or 0 for 38, down by 8, and 1 for 35, down by 4 in the fourth quarter, whatever that stat is. It is the most inexplicable stat when it comes to Kyle Shanahan. Like him being under 500 for a lot of that. I watched the games. It made sense. That stat is insane. And so part of having a good quarterback when you're a coach is you are not one of the 11 guys on the field. You get to call the play, but once the ball is snapped, two things happen. 11 dudes on the other side try to get your guy. Plus, we find out if the other coordinator's call was right. And you need a guy on the field, as good as Andy Reid is, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid is that combo. Brock Purdy does a lot of things. It's really hard to consistently be Kyle Shanahan's quarterback. A lot is required of you. But if you can do what he asks, it makes you a better player. Brock Purdy can do a lot of what he asks. The question is, can he do the stuff that Kyle doesn't ask? He made some great plays. He does. I mean, he's more mobile than I expected. Profiling. And he's really tough, mentally and physically. Really tough. What Kyle can't do is walk onto the field and lead his team to comebacks when his defense isn't good enough and when his run game isn't good enough to suffocate a team for 3 quarters. That is Kyle Shanahan's preferred mode of victory. Suffocation. If he were a serial killer, suffocation. That's what he would do. Right now, it's the other offensive coordinator that gets to systematically pull the Niners apart. The other OC right now is like Dexter, and the Niners are saran wrapped to a surgery table. And it's just systematic. And so the solution, we've been trying to come up with them. What's Steve Wilkes' adjustment? Can they trade for Patrick Surtain? Can they trade for Brian Burns? We'll find all that out by end of today, or really end of Tuesday. But the solution might have to be score more points. And it's really tough for them because they have improved in terms of they have improved. He's better than Jimmy. They've improved post Jimmy offensively. They still don't go over the top down the sidelines. And it's still hard for them. My comparison last year was that they are the Princeton offense, which for those of you non-basketball people, and college basketball starts in a week, by the way. For those of you non-college basketball people, it meant a lot of back screens and chest passes. And it's not one-on-one, hit a three, make a play, which sometimes you need. If you're going to trail, you definitely need it. If you're going to be coming from behind, you definitely need it. And so when you watch these games and the Niners can't control the opponent because they can't get off the field, the other team is systematic, right? Which is what they were. Like, these weren't, they hit the quick touchdown to Jamar Chase after the second Brock Purdy interception, but just like the Vikings the week before, they just marched and marched and marched and marched. And it makes it tough to come back when you can't get a stop because the Niners also have to march. So when I said earlier, if you watch the Niners, you become a clock expert. There's 13 minutes left in the game. And you're like, my boy John Dickinson texted me. He's like, why aren't they hurrying up? And he was right. He was right. They needed to, but they didn't. And they still scored in 5 minutes. And it's all well and good if you get a stop or you don't turn it over. But they did both of those things. So, Brock, cooked? No. Regressing? Statistically, yes. I don't think he is. To me, when you see guys start to regress, you see defenses doing things to them consistently that they can't handle. He makes a lot of throws that tells you, unlike Jeremy, who was really hot, Brock makes a lot of throws consistently that are really tough throws. Really tough throws. The question is not, are they going to start blitzing him? He's proven he can handle that. The question is, can individual players, can they start tricking him? Can a guy who throws with this much anticipation, which means you just have to be right. Because if you're not right, you are just throwing the ball into some random place. Can he consistently not throw interceptions? Or is it one of those deals, man, you're going to throw the ball, you're going to throw the ball 30 times. They're just going to be too bad. There's going to be a couple bad ones in there. Like, that's not acceptable, right? Can he ride that high along with the low being minimized? If he threw 3 touchdowns, but they don't get enough, the Niners don't get enough possessions to throw 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the same game. It sure doesn't feel like that. God, did Jimmy ever have better than Jimmy? I'm not comparing him to Jimmy, but my God, did Jimmy ever have back-to-back games with that level of interception? Somebody in the chat, I'm sure, can tell me. 5 picks should be 6 to 7 in the last 3 games. Chris says sounds just like Jimmy. I think he makes a lot of. I do have that moment where, like, the ball's there, you go. Well, I hadn't had that for 5 weeks. That's a Garoppolo thing where you don't know, you can't quite tell where the ball is going to go. But Garoppolo, I don't like doing the hindsight shit on Jimmy thing. He was what he was. But he didn't consistently make as many difficult throws, I don't think, as Brock did. The other thing to watch is when he hit his head yesterday and grabbed his head. That's alarming. That was alarming. And you got to buy now. We'll see. You don't get as much transparency and communication at this point in time. The last time he had a concussion, he felt it after the fact. He didn't leave the game. This one was late in the game. I was surprised that the independent observer or whatever did not remove him from the game. Romo. Now, it happened. Romo identified the replay very quickly. Just like last week's, it wasn't as obvious. I mean, it was more obvious than last week's, but it wasn't, again, the big head-to-head collision, which is generally guys hitting their head on the ground. Does not seem to be where they identify it. But when Tua got his second one, when he kind of froze up on the field, his hands, I got to go back and look. I think that was because he hit his head. He was not, guys don't really get hit in the head that much anymore. I think it was because he hit his head. So, he looked good up until those 2 picks. There is a question, I think, as to whether or not, he's the quarterback against the Jags. That's just me observing that. Now he's got 2 weeks. He came back quick from this last one. But if you get a second one, I don't know that you come back quick. So here's Eric, who says that pick where Brock was scrambling and threw it to the linebacker 5 feet in front of him, that's a play that Mahomes and Allen make. When you're physically limited, you do not even attempt that play. So what was his physical limitation on that play? Was that an interception of physical limitation? It wasn't an arm strength throw. I guess you could argue his physical limitation on that throw was height. Like if he was 6'4", then that little flip is a little bit higher, maybe. It makes me wonder, can he be trusted to ad-lib? That's what that play made. That interception made me wonder that, less than think about his physical limitations on that play. Can he be trusted to ad-lib? And then you see him later in the red zone, rolling right, back across his body on 3rd down, made the play. Much like the interception he threw last week to end the Minnesota game. Yeah, the physical limitation on that play might just be height. That's fine. I mean, if that's fine. Last 2 weeks, I'd rather have Zach Wilson. There, I said it. Take it back. Scott, Cowboys fan here. We'll trade you Dan Quinn for Shanahan. Unfortunately, Dan Quinn, I don't think that solves the Niners' problem. Dan, if you could somehow throw you don't really have you don't really have a play caller in there that definitely don't want. Dan Quinn being on the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy being on the Cowboys were the Niners' best shot still. So I'd have to say no on that trade. Get Wilkes on the sidelines. I mean, that's always kind of the last ditch. When you got nothing else to do, when you go coach to the sidelines, you're saying this is a motivation issue. And we got to look our guys in the eyes, you know. And it might be that the problem is occurring in the week leading up to the game, not once the game has started. That could be where the problem is. It's his second season, and he clearly can't carry the team by himself yet with no run game at all. Yet, maybe ever. I mean, there's only a handful of quarterbacks that really, really, truly can carry a team. Even it's probably not even a handful, right? And I think at this point, you should be very pessimistic that he can ever be the quarterback, that he will be the quarterback that truly carries a team. The odds are not good. And that's not based on I would have said that when they were 5-0. I think we've talked about that too. Like, it's way too early for the conversation about when do you pay him? But I think it's very clear, like we've talked about it just in that context of what it costs when you pay every quarterback like they're Patrick Mahomes in annual salary. What it costs to get a guy to be your franchise quarterback means you got to pay for guys that can carry it. And the reality is a lot of guys get paid that can't actually really carry you. And the good news for the Niners, if you just take like big picture what they are, a team that runs the ball, plays defense, has good talent on offense, blah, 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 all of that, you don't need a quarterback that can carry you. You don't. You need a quarterback that can execute and not make mistakes. And right now, Brock's only doing half of that. I said it yesterday. I'll say it again. 2 months ago, Kawakami asked Brock, what's the most important quarterback stat? And he said, not turning it over. That's what he said was the most important stat. Yeah. Regroup, retool, get it together during the bye. As it stands, if the playoffs happen today, Niners would be the 6th seed. Ouch. Ouch. Is Pete Carroll going to be the coach of the year in the league? I mean, when you talk about seeding, you got to talk about the fact that the Seahawks are the 1 seed. It's way too early for that conversation. But, I mean, Dan Campbell, Robert Saleh, or Nance keeps going with Salah. A lot of good coaching jobs going on right now. Mike McDaniel. Yeah. Anyway, that I know that's not what Red Jet brought up, but are they going to bring any help in the next 24, 36 hours, whatever it is? Lonnie, all these excuses for Purdy, shake my head. If you can't bring your quarterback back, if you can't bring your team back in the fourth quarter, nothing else matters. Patrick also has Andy Reid in his playbook. And Andy Reid in his playbook have Patrick. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we did not forget, but the low hit interception was it was a 3-pick game. It was a 3-turnover game because he fumbled, so I guess ball don't lie on that one. Marco, 49ers have a tough schedule remaining. Jags, Bucks, Seahawks twice, Eagles, Cardinals, Ravens, Commanders, Commodores, Rams. Maybe looking more like a 10-7 team, which doesn't feel good after a 5-0 start. No, that feels terrible. That feels awful. And it would be, I mean, it'd be one of Shanahan's had high highs, low lows. That would feel, like last year's 13-4 was a high. The year before, the 10-7, by the end felt like a high. but felt very low at times, right? Like they were 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at one point that year. You know, Shanahan can't come back in games. He does pull his team together second half of seasons. I mean, we've seen that. And if you want to find some hope, you are getting at some point Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel back, right? Like, if you wanted to look at it with some optimism, you'd say, well, they haven't had their full team. Now, the counter would be, yeah, but they got other good players. Nobody has their full team. Why do you need your full team? To score more than 17 points. Why do you need your full team? To get a stop. You've turned the other team into what your offense used to be. Kind of. Definitely in last week, the 22 points did not indicate how good the Vikings were offensively against them. The Ayuk, the Ayuk not making that play at the end of the half hurt. That was tough. If Kyle can't run the ball, his offense is flawed. It's systemic. Maybe that's where Trent Williams. Yeah, this is a good point. Deshandre, Deebo and Trent are the tone setters. Without them, we soft as baby shit. Line was already sus before Trent went down. The playbook too reliant on Deebo and his motions. So take away the two. You could argue that if your team has a boombox walkout, the two guys in the front of that, it's safe to say they're the ones that set the tone for your team because they're almost literally setting the tone for your team when they do that. And that act gives you an idea of how emotionally important they are to your group of players. That could be. I mean, I said emotionally. Deshandre is talking about like physically how important they are, which is they're excellent players. That is the best thing they bring, is that they're excellent players. 0-38 when behind by 8 points or more in the fourth quarter. A stunning statistic. Pablito, Trey's Bears games aren't as bad as those, though. Trey Lance's preseason performances this year. Well, I'm not going to do it. That would not have been the solution. I promise you that. Karen, 49ers are losing the trench war. O-line, D-line, that's not on Brock. Team game. Team game. It's all related. On this play, you win. On that play, I win. You make a mistake. I help you out. I make a mistake. You help me out. Team game. So, on the plays where your quarterback gets enough protection and a receiver gets open, can't throw the ball right to the linebacker on some weird ass. Maybe the play was too weird. The play that he threw at the first interception. Maybe the play was too weird. I don't know what I've heard Brock and Kittle explain that play. Maybe the play was just too weird. Deebo's absence has led Kyle to do a lot of Elijah Mitchell, Christian McCaffrey stuff. That was a Mitchell Kittle thing. It was there to be made. I mean, it was. So I don't. The play was. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the play. Play was there to be made. He didn't make it. Girth Brooks. Trey's preseason game, he played with plumbers. Hey, he looked like a plumber. No, I know you weren't. Somebody said, don't do it, guy. I shouldn't. Let's not do it. Astro, Kyle's going to turn Purdy into Jimmy by limiting the offense to 10 yards all in the middle. That's where the interceptions happen. I thought Kyle would be steaming at Brock the last 2 weeks because of these two picks. It has not. Now, they showed his face after the second interception, and he looked. In that moment, I'm like, is he going to Darnold? But I don't think it doesn't feel like he's about to turn down the dial on Brock the way he did on Steve Wilkes. The way Sam Darnold played last season, this preseason, I want to see him run with this offense for just one game, just to see it. I know there was yesterday when Brock got cleared on Saturday. I was good. Glad he's okay. Good. He's a good player. It's good that he's going to play. One half of my body. The other half was like, wanted to see Sam. I wanted to see Darnold. Everybody who's been following this channel since training camp knows. Well, if you've been following it since the offseason started, you know I was not a Darnold believer. I wouldn't call myself a believer, but I turned into a intriguer. I'm intrigued, very intrigued by Darnold. Niners don't have an A.J. Brown type receiver. When they need a play, he's going to get it done. You know, chicken or the egg, right? Like if they had A.J. Brown, could they throw it over the top to him? Yeah, I think they probably could. Niners quarterbacks can throw 50-50 deep balls. Like Brock could just throw it. The problem is Debo doesn't win down the field on the sidelines. Ayuk doesn't really, you can't throw him 50-50 balls. Jennings isn't out there. So that's a two-part problem for the 49ers. Yeah. That's where I don't even know if Danny Gray, if he was what they want him to be, would work. In theory, you just get a fast guy who runs by everybody. And in theory, you just throw it as far as you can and you hit that guy. But in the Kyle Shanahan era, Matt Ryan could do it. But as a 49ers coach, he's never had a guy that throws that ball. And I said it at training camp this year. But they don't like, they would throw these sideline go balls to Debo, I think just because he wanted them to keep him engaged. It's part of what you do in a practice. Drills, like you just run, that's part of the drill, the one-on-one session. But they just don't do it. And I don't think a small, fast guy would be the solution because of the lack of like elite arm strength. I think it's got to be an AJ. It's got to be a big fit. It's got to be like DK or AJ, like a big physical. Doesn't matter how much separations he's got. The touch. I mean, AJ Brown was ridiculous yesterday again. Yeah. It could fall into the category. Be careful what you wish for. Moody's still kicking experimental directional kicks. Yeah, stop. Can this ball go through the end zone, please? I actually think they've held up well, generally well, from a pass rush standpoint. But you also can't take away one of the best players in the league and expect it to holding up and really making, here's one thing I got to ask Jeff Schwartz about this. I've never thought of this. Do offensive linemen, like, how many times a game do they make a play? It's always easy when there's some screen ball and you're like, the analyst can circle the offense. Look at Big 71 getting out here and leading the way. Go get him, big boy. Like, that's easy. But when you're talking about like making plays above replacement, right? Like really making plays. It feels like maybe Jalen Moore he's a par. He's been good. Like you feel good about him. Maybe he's making pars in pass protection and in the run game. And you really need a guy who can get some birdies and eagles. And maybe that's what Trent is. Because it doesn't feel like he's hurting them, especially in the pass game. But they just get worse without Trent Williams. So, Eric, one more here. Joe Burrow just showed us what an actual real deal franchise quarterback can do. If you want to pump up Make-A-Wish kid, then that's the standard he needs to make. This is, again, an example, though, of the extremes with Brock. Like, being a legit top 15 starting quarterback, which is what, borderline top 10 is what this team needs, is different than being a real deal franchise QB, of which there are, 7 in a given year, I would say. Joe Burrow and Brock Purdy are not in the same category. They're not on the same tier. And this was always my pushback at the beginning of the year. Like, anybody arguing that that's what was happening was, I thought, jumping to a conclusion. So that doesn't mean he can't be good enough for this team to win a championship if their defense is what it's supposed to be, if they run the ball, right? One thing I'll tell you this, well, on one hand, you know, this team is, you got to go get the lead going into the fourth quarter, but I think you also want to see Brock play in the fourth quarter. Several months ago, I went back to a stat that Warren Sharp had about the number of passes thrown last year while trailing in the fourth quarter. And Brock had the third fewest behind Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurd. So that's still a question that he has not answered with a, I can do it. Brock was him, and now he's, That is the best comment of the day, and that's a good place to end it. Thanks for hanging, everybody. Hit that like button. Appreciate when you do that. Sponsored by Tito's Handmade Vodka, but you're a sponsor when you hit that like button as well, because that gets this thing out to more people, help out the algorithm, and we appreciate that. Thanks for jumping in, and talk to you all later. Bye.